start off by doing a PPI check-in. And so I would be curious if you're willing to share, maybe in the chat, if you'd be willing to put on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you in terms of peak performance today? Just like to know where everybody is. 8, 10, 9, 8, 7. A lot of high scores today. 8, 8. 10, Ellen. 9, 8, 9. Yay! We're cooking. We're humming on all cylinders. 9, 8. Okay. Thanks, Keith. We appreciate your honesty. 7's still pretty high. 8.5. Wow, that's unusual to see fractions from someone who's not used Verify. Well, lovely. Does anybody want to share what has them being at that particular place in the world? Maybe we can celebrate with you. How about someone who's a 9 or a 10? What is it that's keep having you be so in stride today? Do I need to call on you?
We're all trying to be nice and not go first.
Ah, it would be so nice to me if you went first. How about you, Greg, since you spoke? And you're 9.
Yeah, look, I just, whatever comes to my mind, because I have a thing with this PPI in terms of really separating out what, I want to make sure that when people are telling me their score, they're not describing what's happening around them, but they're telling me how they're dealing with whatever's happening around them. And that to me is a real measure. Like, you know, we used the example of the funerals last year, and I was like, when we were crying and upset and missing our friends, but I was a 9 because that's what you do now. That's, you know, Johnny's gone, that kind of thing, you know. So when I think of the number, I'm really sort of saying, am I where I'm supposed to be in the way I want to be? And that's almost always a yes. And when it's not, it's like, oh, what am I missing out there? So I don't, and I also get a bit concerned if we're celebrating everyone who's a 9. I'm not talking about you, sweetheart. It's just like we do, Paul, and everything. And it's like, it almost makes us bad for not being a 9. Like we almost get like, oh, I'm not a 9 today. Like, oh, good. Well, I was fine before you asked me that question. Now I'm not, you know. So yeah. That's my PPI answer.
That's a beautiful frame for the PPI. And I think that sense of, are we getting what we need in order to handle whatever's happening in our lives? And are we really aware and honoring those things and building them in is the key. So thanks for that frame, that reframe, Greg. Appreciate it. Excellent. Anybody else want to speak?
Yeah, so following on Greg's comment about the PPI and the number, there have been times when maybe I would say that my number was a 5 or a 6. If I didn't have ID and have an understanding of how I get myself back on track, my number might have been a 2 or a 3.
Right.
So life isn't always perfect, and we do have bumps in the road. I think those strategies provide the lows to not be as low as they might be.
Beautiful. I've also heard in teams that when someone says, you know, I'm really out of stride, or I'm a 4 or a 5, it helps people shift their thinking about that person, maybe not take things personally and reach out to see, you know, what they can do to be in support of, or what needs they might be able to sort of shore up. Yeah. All right. Hi, Angela. Glad you're joining us. Yeah.
I put a fraction in there because my thinking is fractionalized. In that I've been married to a 6482 for 52 years, and realize in my business that I need to bring in a decision maker alongside me. But with my ID, that's a big decision that when you bring a shareholder in, they're going to press their ID onto me, and the lady I bring on board is an 8552. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. So my thinking is fractionalized while I now come to terms with this. But I know I have to do it.
Well, there you go. And to Pam's point, it's a good thing you have strategies, right? So that you're not missing each other around that. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Thanks. Burn the boats.
Well, the thing is, Sonia, she's been heavily involved in the writing of the Emotional Intelligence Revolutionize the Way You Live book, and then she's gone through the others and tidied them all up. So I could see the quality of her work is way above where I could ever be. So it's recognition of someone's talent and hard work. But it also means I have someone beside me now that's going to hold me to task. I can't improvise my way out of things.
It's a beautiful thing. Accountability is a beautiful thing.
I'll know in a month or two.
Yeah. You can report back next time we meet. Excellent. Well, I'm not sure how many of you were here when we met before and did training on career, but before we jump into content, that kind of thing, I'm just curious, when we look at ID, there are so many ways that we can leverage the insights that we get, so many places that we can build strategies. I'm curious what the current challenges are, either that you're facing or that your clients are facing, that you might want to sort of put on the table today.
I would say what I'm seeing is a lot of clients really thinking about making major career changes midlife or later on in life, like encore career, and really struggling with confidence and struggling to create a picture for themselves as to what all those possibilities are and how to kind of put together a plan for how to go about figuring out what they might want to do next.
Great. Krista.
I've seen some clients trying to a lot of restructures going on in clients at the moment with downsizing and shuffling, etc. So two main themes is trying to recreate an environment of accountabilities, and what that really means, when responsibilities are shifting, and then obviously, I think that's probably the main one as regarding this topic. There's more about, in change, how do teams collaborate more effectively, but it's less about career, it's more about collaboration. So.
Right. That's part of, we're always having to readjust within our career. So I think that's a really valid topic. Who else? Did any of you who came to the last session take away, we gave you some things to think about in terms of your own career? Did anyone take any of that away and do a little bit of noodling on that? All right, well, let me just share a different prompt. How about this? This isn't PPI, but can you put in the chat, maybe give yourself a score on 1 out of 10 based on how you feel about your current role, not your strategies about it, but the current role itself and how you're feeling about where your career progression is going. Yay. 9. Okay. 9, those are also really high. Interesting. Yeah, great. It's a 9. Okay, great. Well, then let's take those questions that we have and start looking at some beautiful resources that Krista put together. And maybe we can answer or address what Krista and Tristan brought up based on the resources that we have. So I'm just going to let you sort of noodle over this. And I want to know what calls you or what questions you have. So I encourage you to look at your drives. This is a lot of data. And And then maybe we'll come, your strongest drives, maybe pick your 2 strongest drives, and then we'll come back and sort of talk through them. Give me a wave when you've managed your top 2. Yay. Terrific. So is there anybody that read something that really leapt out at them before we sort of go left to right like we sometimes do? Was there anything that really struck you where you thought, oh, that's something that I can really use with my client, or that really has a lot of resonance for me?
Okay, so the first one for me, one of the things that really jumps out, and I guess it's true for a lot of verifiers, is the third point, which says, do you network with others whose expertise and standards you respect, from whom you feel you can learn? I think that that's certainly one thing with verifiers. They need to be working for somebody that they're inspired by, and also that they really see as a subject matter expert. At least that's my perspective.
Beautiful. Anyone else resonate
I would
with
agree
that?
with that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
absolutely agree with that.
100%.
And the other thing that occurs to me is, are you aligned with your vision, underlying values of your organization work role? That's what puts me at a 9. And I'm having I've been working with a communications and marketing coach for the last 3 months, and new website went up the other day, and it's right. Like, it feels right. And that hits both my use, verify, and my avoid, authenticate.
Fabulous.
The bullet points.
Thanks, Ellen. Who else?
And the other one, I think, Alona, too, avoid improvise for me. Do you feel valued for raising risks and able to operate at a pace that works for you without constant pressure? So it's not really about the pressure, but the valued scenario is, I think, a big one. You know.
And how's everybody feeling about those things? Is there any place where people would be curious to tune up a little bit, or to spend some strategy creation time, where it's like, oh, that actually reminds me, I'd like to do a little more of that, or I need a little more of that? No?
I do think Alona's. Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
Go, Ruth. Go, Ruth.
No, I don't know if this is going to go down the same path, and so I don't want to sidetrack us. But I was wondering, when folks who are driven to avoid improvise, when you bring up a risk or something, what's the best way for others to make you feel seen and valued? That's valuable. Is there something that that really says, oh yeah, they were really listening?
Yeah. Well, I was going to go down that path, so there you go. We must be attuned. Because I was going to say that very much with the avoid improvise, there's I think sometimes a hesitancy to raise risks because of how people are going to respond. So if you've had negative responses in the past, people look at you like, oh God, you're being negative again. There's a reluctance to bring them up. So I think one of the things, and it depends on the organization, that avoid improvise can sometimes feel reluctant to bring them up, know them, and then sort of almost watch them play out and go, oh, I should have said something. So it's like you do that, and I'll do the self-flagellation as the verifier, going, oh gosh, why didn't I say something? So I think one of the strategies is how to identify the risks, because I think it's a really important, it's an absolute talent that avoid improvise have, but present it in a way that it's not just a problem, and then how could it be an opportunity, or what could we do? So instead of just saying, we're going to fall over that cliff, we'll say, well, actually, we need to watch out. There's a cliff coming up, but I think if we do this first, that might actually be a great way we could avert that problem. So it's just not just give the problem or the risk, but give the solution or a potential as well. And then I think it's a more rounded way of delivery. And works for all the drives too, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah. The question that Krista asked about clients thinking about career change and confidence and possibilities, I kind of feel like that might be kind of an interesting frame as we go through these to just think about, like, all right, let's look at Use Verify. When I think of people who are driven to Use Verify, really tapping into their confidence and looking at those possibilities, there is something to me about, have they looked back at their successes? What feedback have they gotten, or can you encourage them to get about their, their contribution and how they've taught and the value that they've brought? I'm just curious how that would strike people driven to Use Verify. If someone gave you an assignment and said, okay, look, I know you're headed into something new and you may not be a subject matter expert here, but let's gather information and feedback about where you've been successful in the past and see how he can parlay that, so that they have a data set to operate from.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, what I find is just having that conversation about the definition of expertise that verifiers have versus the definition of expertise that the rest of the world has, and just naming that differential and how that can be such a barrier to allowing yourself to explore opportunities. So I think it's really true, Ilona, that it's both about having them reflect for their own experience, like where do you see it, but then giving them an assignment to go out and interview people, because we're great at collecting data and we like research. So make it a research project to go talk to people about, what do they see as your brand? What do they see as what you have to offer, as a way to try to help spark some of that confidence a little bit more.
Great.
Yeah, I think what Greg put in chat, people may be prone to think that they're not as valuable as the rest of us do. So I think tapping into what you said, Krista, getting feedback from others as well would be, for somebody wired to Use Verify, I think would be really beneficial. And thinking back to what you said, Ilona, of what skills have they actually used in whatever it is that they're doing that are transferable to wherever they're going.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone who's driven to Use Verify on the call is there something else that would help support you in terms of this ability to reach outside of your area of expertise and see possibilities or build confidence for doing something new? What's worked for you in the past? Grant, how about you? 70 and Verify, sorry. I'm just gonna call on you.
No, it's a good question. As we answered that question about what resonates, I think I agree with Vic and a few others, like certainly 1 and 3 just pop out of the page at me. I think the area that I could improve on and be more deliberate on is the seeking feedback. And I think that's something I've always not been super strong at, and just knowing that I am on the right course, or I know how to course correct if I get that feedback. So for me, that's something, and I'm new in my job. I'm only 6 weeks into a new job with a new company, and I'm like a kid in a candy shop. So 1 and 3 really pop out for me at the moment. In a number of areas, I'm really enjoying the work environment and the people I work with. However, I know it's a great time to get into the habit of, using the muscle or growing the muscle of seeking feedback. And I think that's the one area I could be more deliberate on.
So in that new role, it's really interesting. I appreciate what you're saying. And I know that sometimes when people coach people who are Use Verify and new enroll, that they coach them to have benchmarks and set up benchmarks ahead of time that say, when I know this, or when I have this amount of research or information, I'm going to contribute this to this level in a meeting, or I'm going to start putting my ideas out there, so that they're not always kicking that ball forward.
Yeah.
So that there's that holding themselves accountable.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Sorry.
can throw something in there. I think personally, I think the term subject matter expert can be career limiting. Because as someone's used Verify and they evolve, if they want to evolve in leadership and people management, unless you want to call that their subject matter expert, they don't need to be the one that knows the most about a subject. And sometimes I think it's better that they don't, because if not, they tend to do too much themselves and not empower other people as part of their leadership.
Great point.
Can I just jump in here? I'm getting very confused, which is why I'm fairly quiet. Are we trying to sort out our own careers? Are we trying to sort out as consultants how to give advice to other people on careers? Or are we just throwing something out there as an exploratory kind of topic to see where we end up?
Thank you for that. I'm sorry I didn't set that context appropriately. I think we're doing the third, and this is why I asked if anybody had any specific things that they were working on, or if they had a client that they were working with, so that we could do a real-time sort of exploration of the material based on that. But Ian, do you want to speak to that at all?
I was just looking at Greg's comment, and I think he's quite right. I think all three will work, because I think it's going to depend on the individual. I mean, some people are going to be looking at it from their own perspective, their own careers. Other people are going to be looking at it from who they're coaching, consulting with. And then I think, the throwing it out and challenging some of it, I think is also good from a perspective of people just trying to get their heads around what does it really mean and how to apply it. So I think, we didn't necessarily set it up to be any one of them, Keith, but I think any of them will work. As long as maybe we set the context when we ask the question.
Yes.
And I'm happy with all three of them. I'm happy with anyone, with anything, or all three of them at the same time. I just, looking at the comments, we seem to go down one track, and then we sort of came at it from a different perspective. I don't think we've answered Krista's questions yet, and I'm just struggling to see kind of how or what everybody expects to gain in terms of building their knowledge. But if it's sort of exploratory questions, hey, I'm in. I love exploratory questions. So
I guess I'll put it out to the group. Would you rather focus on your own career today, or how we coach others? Or do you want to just talk about the resource and have an exploration around how we help people be in stride with their career?
Can I jump in and ask maybe a more simple question, which is how many people are consultants and how many people are actually more in a traditional working career?
It's about 50-50, Keith.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that might be why I'm seeing sort of different positions, if you like.
Correct. Yeah, it's it's an absolute, I'd say roughly 50-50 between the clients and consultants.
Okay, cool. So sorry, coming back to your question, Alona.
Don't be sorry, but I think it's worth clarifying for the group what would be the most value to you. Maybe you can put it in the chat and I can scroll down so that Greg says let everyone set their own purpose.
Well, if I look at this list, I definitely can pick up some things for myself.
Right.
Careers up and downs. We are built psychologically to compare. And so if I'm working with someone that's a 6, 7, 3, 4, which is not my ID, it's different.
Right.
Can still look for similarities of how I would relate to where they are at, if they're looking for a career change, if they're not happy with their career, or where their career is really working for them. And I think it goes back and forth. I think we have to think about ourselves and how this applies to us. Oftentimes you can't give away something you haven't experienced yourself. And so I think both apply. If you're in a current role and you're happy with your role, you're happy with the company you're working for and so forth, then what are some of the things that are going to derail you? I think you can get a lot of value out of this list from that perspective. I know for me, my big derailers is that in the avoid complete, if I can't see options and I start feeling boxed in, I pretty much want a different job.
Yeah.
It's that quick for me.
So would you use something like this, and you can say no, would you use something like this if you had a client who was out of stride or feeling like they just weren't satisfied with their career, to look at it and say, help prompt the discussion around where do we really need to focus and how can we build some strategies around that?
Yes, I absolutely would. And I'm coincidentally working with someone right now who is a 6734.
Okay.
And she wants to find a different role. And where she's not giving herself permission is because she doesn't have a clear picture of what that looks like. It's like, oh, I just want something different. And then how do you really get a picture of what that looks like? And oftentimes what I will say to people, to me, this is a list of ingredients. And when you don't have, these are your ingredients for success in so many ways. It isn't so much the face of the job as much as does it have those ingredients here that will help you to thrive. Someone said something to me years ago. She was a 5537, and she said, I don't really care what the job is as long as there's huge problems to solve and I can go fast. And yeah. I always remembered that because I thought, yeah, that's quite right. And oftentimes people try to fit themselves in to a specified role thinking they're going to get their needs met by finding this description. This is really a description.
Okay. Thanks, Pam.
Yeah. So Krista, the people that you are working with, I would assume you understand their, or you know their ID. Yep. And looking at this, what do you see as far as things that you could potentially help them with? Maybe what is their ID and what are you seeing here?
Yeah. So it's similar to what Pam was saying. So my mind, as I'm reading this, I'm sort of flipping this because it's almost like a checklist as they're thinking about possible. I guess it's two things. One, it's helping them what kind of process is going to work best for you for a career search. And then once you have some options on the table, how do you best evaluate those options? And so when I look at this, I feel like this is really great for part 2, which is like, I just flip it in my mind, like, oh, as you're evaluating options, like if you're a use verify, like, okay, is this an area where you can continue to grow your expertise, blah, blah, blah. So I think this is great for that piece. I think the first piece in terms of thinking about what sort of process is going to work best for them to engage in this career exploration, that I think is this I think applies really well to the second piece. And the first piece, I'm thinking more, for example, like with a verified person, having them do research and go and interviewing folks. For somebody, if it's a strong use authenticate, let's find people, like look for examples of people who have careers that look interesting to you and spend time talking to them so you can get a more clear picture as to what that might look like. I'm thinking, somebody I'm working with right now he's a down, up, down, up. And so trying to think about what would work, like very similar to your ID, Patricia, right? Like what would work for you when it comes to what kind of process for career exploration would work really well, right? So that's where my mind is going. But I think this is a great resource for part 2 of evaluating options.
Great. Yeah, I can see I'm using it for myself when I said, I'm a 10 in, where I'm in stride with my career, but I can also see as I'm coaching people, helping them to either maybe get them back into stride with their career and or they're like, if they are looking for something else. So,
and I would even say both and. The more people we can have them pinpoint what it is in their current situation based on this, that they can build strategies around, then they're more in stride. So it's easier to find another role, right? Or their talents are shining a little more as they're interviewing.
Absolutely. They're showing up.
Yeah.
I'm getting excited about using this.
So is there a drive, another drive that someone wants, we just want to dive into as a concept for potentially how we could leverage this to coach others or support others? What's a drive we want to pop into? Jessica,
That's interesting.
yeah, it's an interesting idea, this idea of, is this current situation working for you, right? I don't know that it's an either or, but thanks, Jessica.
I was just saying, when I'm looking at this and I don't get career out of it, right? I get
Role,
or am I happy right now and why, based off of where I'm at now in my role.
right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because when I hear career, I hear, okay, should I be a doctor? Should I be a lawyer? Where would I fit in? That's just the simple mindset. But this is more, how are you in stride, right? And I think a lot of your career is based off of your employer or where you are at right now.
Right. And I think part of how we use something like this is we don't necessarily say, oh, you're a 5'7", 6'3", you should be a doctor. But what we say is, if you're a doctor or if you're thinking about being a doctor, how do you choose the right environment for you? And also, how do you build in and negotiate with your current boss or your current role to be having these needs met?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And great point, Leonie. I don't know if you can see the chat, Ilona.
This is more around job crafting, ways you can make your role more likely to be meeting your needs. That's, yeah, Leonie, I think I hear this a lot when I'm working with clients where they say, well, that's just not how this job is, right? And I think there's a passive approach there around, well, does this one work for me? If not, I have to move to somewhere else, instead of having agency and asking and crafting what you need in your current situation.
Yes, and I think if you don't really know what you need, so I guess is the authenticate for me coming through. How clear are you about what you need? Then it's hard to address job crafting. It's hard to see the ways that it could be changed, and sometimes there are small ways that things can be done. And so I think a tool like this can be really helpful for people to picture and start to get creative about what small changes could be made that then can snowball.
So maybe we need to sort of rename this and have this be a resource around working environment. And then when we talk about career, we focus on different elements.
Yeah, I think that's really true.
Yeah, is your current environment working for you?
Interviewing, we could have interview strategies for different, drives, or how do we talk about our talents, or all right. Well, we'll look into that. Thanks. So do we want to sort of touch through these in terms of helping people assess where they are currently in their career? I mean, in their role?
Or the environment they're in, either one, yeah.
Yeah. And I think this actually, to me, this does actually speak to Tristan's question around these clients that are dealing with restructures. How is it that when there's a new set of expectations or a new set of requirements or metrics that they're working towards, how do they negotiate? What is it that they need to ask for or surface as they're reestablishing and contracting a new reshaped role?
Looking at this, I mean, this could be really helpful because right now I'm working with a client that they just went through a major restructuring and lost some people. So there's, the survivor guilt and all that going on. But I think that as the new leader is coming in, it would be really helpful in me working with the different clients to help structure the environment where it's going to work for each one of them. And then
Right.
also for the new leader. It's an interesting concept, an interesting way to use it.
So let's talk about one of them. Like, let's maybe talk about the complete, use and avoid complete. How do these feel to you? Those of you, let's just look at the use complete and ask the completers on the call. How do these feel to you? Do they strike you? Is there something you want to share with the people on the call about working with people who are wired like you?
Greg says it works for me. Mr. Use Complete, come on.
It's like, it's very interesting. I think when it comes to career planning, for example, the career planning process for someone who's driven to use complete is a completely different animal than it is for those of us who are avoid complete. And the way I've witnessed it is around, is this skill building on that? And is that taking me where I need to go longer term in my career? Why are you laughing, Ian?
Greg's just put what's
career planning.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Well, you and me, Greg, right?
Me too.
Well,
yes.
Well, I was going to say a lot of too, and I mean, this is sort of my combo: avoid, authenticate, avoid, complete. You actually have the way it's meant to play out. You know, you have in your mind how things should be and how your career is going to play and where you think you're going to be by this time. And I think often for people, you know, certainly in my stage of life, you get to that, oh, is this really where I thought I was going to be? And then sort of you do that sort of reassessment. And, it's like, so for us, I think use complete, we're often looking and, is this where I thought I was going to be? Is this where and that can be, good, bad, somewhere in between. And that's a big thing because it's like, it's your expectations, where you think it could and should be.
And I think even naming what a career plan is, right? I work with clients who have career planning discussions with people who are more wired like Greg and me, and they're more brainstorming sessions around like, what are you excited about in the next steps of your career, and who should we put you in touch with, and what needs to happen in the next quarter? Whereas career planning for someone who's more wired like Vicky or Ian might take on a different structure or timeline.
Well, it'd be very much around, so what have I got to do? When have I got to do it by? And what's the time frame? So if I do this and then achieve this, then in 6 months I'll be this. So it is very, very much about the progression, a linear progression, which I don't think the avoid complete, that's not where they would go. Whereas I think the use complete are very step, where as we move up the ladder type of thing is very much I think a use complete type of process.
What are your thoughts on this, Keith, as a two?
I don't think I've ever even thought about career planning in my life. What I was thinking, I must confess, I was sort of off on a tangent a little bit, because I was thinking that I think that given some of the stuff that's going on in the world, just the whole idea of having or being able to plan a stable career with progression, it is a bit kind of, I think people are struggling with it. And I think that is maybe one of the bigger issues that we're trying to solve here, which is, does a career in the way that we used to think about it and still think about it actually is it still relevant to what the craziness that's going on in the world? Or is it being sort of forced more to be an avoid complete style career planning methodology where you just kind of roll with the punches? And I guess what I was thinking is, what's the relevance of career planning as we used to do it in today's environment? I mean, I don't know whether it's that relevant anymore. That might be a big call.
No, I don't think it is at all. I think it's an oxymoron. If you think of people and look at your history of the world, how many people planned their career or found the career found them? and a number of people who did a certain uni course and then they're never anywhere near in their life using that course, or started out in this and then wound up over there. And I just wonder whether we're setting ourselves up for failure and kids get this amazing pressure in high school that they have to have the next 50 years planned out for what they're going to do. But I don't know anyone successful who is where they are now from where they started, where they were training to be, if you know what I mean, And I think it would be more like, instead of career planning, is, career options and what makes you excited. And the people I know who have long-term careers are like research scientists who are going to find out how the amino acid gets between there and that spider for that species. Like they love it. They've done it all their lives, and they never planned it. They couldn't help but be that, or help but be a pianist, or help but be a baseball player. So I was wondering whether we want to be better served to find out what are we really missing, what are we here to live for, and go, be that more.
So how do we keep those people who are driven to use complete in stride in this environment? How do we support them?
Well, I live with one of those people. those people. Vera's made a lot of choices on what was right for everybody else around her in her career. She turned down a chance to go into medicine because it was too much schooling for her parents to pay for. So she did the quickest degree she could. And then she turned that into something else and turned that into something else. And so what makes people move, the up-completes, find out who they're trying to please, or who they're trying to look after, who they're trying to tuck in. And most of the up-completes I know who have made serious moves, they did because not moving was more like down yellow. Not moving was like deadly, and the stiltedness of it. So maybe we get better at knowing what makes people make a jump, or what makes them want to move, and work from there.
It's also setting up expectations. So I think, like, my 3 kids are all use complete, and we've been pretty much, since they've finished uni, TAFE, whatever they did, saying you're probably going to keep changing career. This is not going to be the thing for life. So when you, as a use complete, like, it was very different to when I left university. It was like, this is your career. And that was my expectation, because that was the plan. But when we give them the plan will change. And, so what you're doing now is probably not what you're going to be doing in a couple of years. And it's actually, so far, it's been playing out. Certainly my eldest 2, that's exactly what's happened. What they started to do, what they're now doing is different. But that was the expectation that we sort of provided for them. So I think it's like a similar type of approach with people. We're saying, well, the plan really is that this will change. So every, you need to continually, the old strategy plan is to have no plan.
Yeah.
And that's what you've got to build into the thinking around it.
Can I pose a question on that, Ian? Does a plan with fuzzy edges work, or does it need to be like, or what level of fuzziness can you get into your plan?
I'd love to hear from Steve, because I saw a facial expression when that question was asked.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not fuzzy, that's for sure. I might fuzzy in my explanations. Detail-oriented analytical was the skill sets I go, but as a use completer, I found I've got to be careful if I get cheesed off in the organisation because I'm not achieving results, being more on the high achiever side, productivity, achieving results, and with a touch of the use verify, getting feedback which is constructive. They sort of my 2 hot buttons, but on the use complete is being productive, achieving, and having tasks, plans around that. So certainly
but what
not fuzzy.
About fuzzy plans? What about those? I think Keith was asking, what if the plan is a fuzzy plan? How does that work for you?
No, it doesn't, which is interesting, because my next career move is into retirement. So I've been busy planning out for the last 3 years. So there is no fuzziness around that. It's very, very specific. But it's driven to remain in particular roles because of what that plan is about. So it is very driven. And I've learned to work through difficult situations in the last 10 years. And something called the mastery curve, and holding on to working through difficult situations, coming out the other side, they're making decisions in line with my drives rather than just being reactive. So if you've got a fuzzy plan, you become reactive and you bounce around, as I found. And I sit on the other side. I do mentoring inside the company I work for. So I'm managing my own career, but managing and helping others manage their careers as well, and their roles. And I pick up on what Greg said before. I think we tend to land in some of our roles. I know my first job, my dad took me to a job interview and I got the job. Was that what I wanted to be? No. But I landed there and have gone that way ever since, or in different industries. But I didn't sort of I had no idea at school. So it's interesting, Greg, I tend to support you. We tend to land in stuff due to circumstances in the early days, and then whether we got either the mentorship and or guidance to make a change or do something different. It's an interesting journey.
Thanks.
Sorry, I've answered a lot of things there.
That's all right. Thank you. But did that answer your question, Keith, about the fuzzy plan, or is there, Ian, do you have an answer on the fuzzy plan?
Again, I think it's this is probably now a 6 talking to a 2. But again, it's my definition of fuzzy is probably not yours, Keith. So I'd say, yeah. So an example would be in my early career, I used to, say to my boss when I started, like, I'm nearly done. So in other words, I've come in, I've done what we were said to do. I'm ready for next. I didn't know what next was. I just knew the plan was when this was finished, this particular project, I was ready for the next. That's about, to me, that was fuzzy. I'm saying it's probably not fuzzy for you. Yeah. But again, that was my definition of, like, I wasn't sure exactly what it would be. It's in the same company, roughly the same area. But it was like, moving from sort of a finance to a customer service. That was as fuzzy as it got. But I knew it was going to be related in somehow.
Yeah, and I think that answers the question, Ian, because the more I sort of talk about it, the more I realize what the question was. The question was that in this crazy world that we live in, and given that the past 5,000 years seems to have everybody just sort of landing in some place rather than actively starting a career, how or to what level do we, or are we able to, either as a completed person or help a completed person build a career plan at a level that doesn't end up being too fuzzy? That I think was really the question. I think you've answered the question, which is that each completer may need a certain degree of less fuzziness depending on the level of the intensity of their drive or their personal experiences. So, for example, from listening to you, in the level of fuzziness or the level of black and whiteness was if you knew you were going to another project, that was okay. Whereas for Stephen, it's when I retire, I'm going to go fishing on Tuesday and golfing on Wednesday and something else on Thursday. So
the other thing too, Keith, is also thinking about, stop planning 5, 10, 15 years in advance. Just shorten your plan. So it's 6 months, and again, that's probably a long time to avoid complete, but to use complete, that can be a long time. So, but again, even just shrinking that expectation time frame can also make a difference as well.
I think I look at ID as it drove me to my curiosity, right? And I use the example of, I always found myself wanting to know the whole picture. Like, okay, what is that department doing over there? And then liking larger projects, and then knowing my ID. There was parts of, needing to know how the wheel works and everything. So I gravitated to certain roles, I think, based off of the curiosity, which was sparked by my ID.
Great. And how do you now keep it fresh and continue to learn and grow in your career, rather than just say, okay, these are the roles I'm gravitating towards, and this is what I do? So I'm curious, as an Avoid Complete, how do people who are driven to use Complete say, oh, it's time for me to incorporate a new skill, or I'm going to adapt and pivot, since the world is changing?
Yeah, I don't have a direct answer for you. I would say this is almost what drove me to attend this call.
Right.
Of like maybe a check-in, or, you know, if I'm, I think the driver though is usually, do I feel productive? Which again is high complete.
Authenticate.
Yeah. Or even
yeah.
authenticate, right? Yeah. And then that leads me down certain paths.
Might be interesting to have like a quarterly shadow day where you shadow someone else in another part of the organization or a completely different thing, so that you're physically present, right? That's the use authenticate, and it's part of your regular cadence, so you know to expect it. I don't know.
Yeah, or like I said, I find myself signing up for projects, even though I don't know where I fit in, but I know I'm going to be able to assess different landscapes. So.
Thanks. Beautiful.
Can I throw another spanner in the works? And I'm
Please.
Got 4 minutes left. There's a theme attached to career planning, or which is a theme of progression. You have to have progression, otherwise something is bad. And I question whether that is actually relevant to people's fulfillment in life. Why can't someone start off at the bottom rung in an organization and remain there for the rest of their career and be completely happy?
I think if they're in stride, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think there's also, it's equally beneficial to try a leadership role or a strategic role and then decide that's not your thing and go, you know, return, you don't, you know, I think that's acceptable, maybe not societally, but how do other people think about that? Yeah, go ahead.
The reason I mention it is because I'm sure I have been guilty on many occasions of, as soon as someone says, I'm thinking about my career, of automatically going, oh, okay, so we've got to get you to be the CEO. Whereas what I really should be starting from is, are you actually happy where you are now?
Or what's the quality of life or experience that you want to have? Right? That's a great question.
Is that a question or a kind of wandering, wombly kind of observation?
It's interesting. I got a question for you, Keith. If you have a team member who is very, very comfortable in the role they are, and I've got someone who's very, very capable at being a team leader but don't want to be, is that bad? And from my perspective, it's normal and it's okay. But if you sort of apply that sort of question statement of whether you look at someone, oh, they want to be a CEO, do we look down on people who are very, very happy in what they're doing in a day-to-day role, and that's fulfilling for what they're doing?
I think
not everybody. Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
And I think that depends largely on the company culture. I have worked with organizations where they're like, if they're not moving, they're stagnating. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. Then we need to leverage your ID talents about how do you talk about your talents and your contribution.
Well,
right?
so true. And this particular person I'm referring to has been with the, not the same company, company's gone through 3 takeovers, but they're in the same role for nearly 18 years, but very, very happy. And her lifestyle and family is more important, and her career funds her lifestyle, but it's quite adequate. So it's an interesting combination.
It's an important question about priorities and goals early, right?
Should be talking about life planning as opposed to just career.
And it's also
there's another topic, Keith.
Yeah, it's also the difference between working to live and living to work.
Yeah.
And the world is changing.
Yeah, it is.
I think because of the circumstances, particularly around COVID and working from home, that's pushing that bigger question of as a career nowadays anyway, forefront of people. So whether you're a working person or whether you're a consultant trying to help people, I think that's a really, a piece that you have to be aware of, because that's what people are thinking about.
Well, you look in Sydney, so many people have moved out of the CBD and moved into the country and working from home in the country as effectively as they was living closer to the CBD. So it's changed a lot of lifestyle things.
Yeah.
I was reading
too, moving out of state.
This is possibly slightly off topic, but I came across one of the things that I'm struggling with one of my clients is the fact that there is research to show that productivity has gone up with people working remotely, but also research to show that collaboration has gone down from people working remotely. So the successful companies, the successful people of the future, or the successful workers of the future will be the people who retain the productivity working remotely, but retain the collaboration of being in the same place and physically getting together. But there's a big question for you. How do you do that? Sorry.
Next time.
Thank you, Keith, for asking the big
You
question.
might have given us our next topic, Keith.
And on that
Thank
subject,
you all for being here. I appreciate your input and feedback. Paul will be back.
Thanks, Alana. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alana.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.